Abortion, guns, the death penalty, and more are on the new docket as the new Supreme Court term gets underway. This marks the first full term with the court's 6-3 conservative-leaning majority. And court watchers have their eyes on how the justices will rule on several high-profile cases that could have huge implications. For more on the cases to watch, let's bring in Jessica Levinson. She's a CBS News legal contributor and a professor at Loyola Law School. So, Jessica, one of the most watched cases this term is a case about Mississippi's abortion law. State officials want the court to allow that state, Mississippi, to continue to ban almost all abortions after 15 weeks. And as you know, this summer, the Supreme Court allowed Texas's new abortion law to remain in effect, which bans abortions once embryonic cardiac activity is detected, which is often as soon as 6 weeks. So let's talk about the implications this could have for Roe versus Wade.
Absolutely. We thought that this Mississippi case was going to be the big abortion case of the year until Texas happened. But the Mississippi case is still the one that's set for the Supreme Court to hear. They're going to hear it in oral arguments on December 1st. And make no mistake, it is a full frontal attack on Roe versus Wade. It's designed to undermine Roe versus Wade. It's designed to go to this conservative 6-3 conservative court and say to them, what are you going to do now? And essentially our current standard, as you said, it's under Roe versus Wade, that 1973 case, and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, that 1992 case, which essentially says states, you can implement restrictions on abortions pre-viability as long as they're not undue. When is viability? About 22 to 24 weeks. Now, a ban obviously is more than just a restriction. And so there's no way to square our current case law, the Roe case, the Casey case, with this Mississippi law. I think, frankly, after what we saw with the court doing in Texas, the only question here is, will we see that sentence where the court says, we are overturning Roe versus Wade? Or perhaps more likely, will the court just somehow say, we can overturn the essential part, we can uphold the essential or main part of Roe without overturning it? And will they essentially hollow out and hobble Roe? I think that might be the more likely scenario.
There's a case out of New York that challenges the state's denial of concealed carry gun licenses for self-defense. The petitioner says that it violates the Second Amendment. What could a ruling in his favor mean for gun rights?
So a ruling in his favor could mean that about 6 to 7 other states that have very similar laws that say if you need a concealed carry permit, you have to go and say, I have a good reason for doing so, that all of those laws could be on the chopping block. This is a big case to watch because the Supreme Court really hasn't touched the Second Amendment in about a decade, much to the chagrin of some conservative justices like Justice Thomas, who said, basically, is this still a right? Is this still in the Bill of Rights? We need to take cases addressing it. So this case picks up where the court essentially left off 10 years ago, will tell states how far they can go in requiring these licenses and requiring good cause for these licenses.
So, Jessica, there's a lot of talk about how this conservative-leaning court could rule on big cases this term. But at the end of the last term, the justices didn't rule along ideological lines all the time. So what are you going to be watching as the court proceeds to rule on these cases?
You know, what's really interesting going into this term, we've heard at least 3 of the 9 come to us in speeches, sometimes closed, sometimes open, and say, we don't rule along ideological lines. We're not partisan hacks. We're not just politicians in robes. And I can't escape the feeling that they are just preparing us for what's about to come. Were there some decisions last term where it looked like they weren't voting according to whether or not a Republican president or a Democratic president appointed them? Absolutely. But we have a different kind of docket this term. We have some different questions. And I think we're going to see a lot of big 6-3 conservative decisions when it comes to abortion, as we talked about, gun control. There are a lot of religious liberty and religious rights cases on the docket, potentially a big case dealing with affirmative action. I think this is going to be a very conservative court. And let's remember, the first time the court has the full 9-member complement of the 6-3 composition ever. They didn't start this way last term.
The case of Boston Marathon bomber Tsarnaev, that's his name, will be coming up in court next week. A lower court threw out his death sentences, but the Justice Department is actually asking the Supreme Court to reinstate them. What are the issues in this case, and what does the government need to prove in order to show Tsarnaev is eligible for the death penalty?
Yeah, this is a case where the government thought it had already proved all it needed to. They already got the death sentences. And then there was a challenge. And the challenge was based on the idea that the federal judge in this case, one, didn't ask the jurors, didn't say, how much media have you consumed about this case? Therefore, not potentially ensuring that the jurors were, in fact, as neutral and open as they could be. And that the jury did not, at the sentencing phase, get information that his brother actually had committed a separate crime, a triple murder. And the question really is whether or not asking the jury about how much media they'd consumed and not giving the jury that information, was that so problematic that the death sentence cannot be implemented in this case. I have a feeling, again, with a conservative court, that they may be comfortable with those potential errors and may reinstate the death penalty in this case.
Jessica, just going back to something you mentioned earlier, one of the things that I've seen, and I'm not a court watcher, so maybe this has happened before, but you're right. One of the things that I did notice is that some of these justices have become vocal, whether in print or in interviews that they've given, where they attempt, as you just suggested, to indicate to the public at large that they're not perhaps what most people perceive them to be. Has this happened before, where we've had these justices, Supreme Court justices appointed for life to serve on the bench, taking their case to the American people? I mean, it's kind of, they don't need to do that because they're never going to be in danger of losing their jobs. And so are you surmising that they're doing that because they're priming the American people for some of their decisions later in the year?
I think that's absolutely part of it. Have I ever seen anything like this? No, I have not. And let's remember, they are not going to lose their jobs. You're right. They're Article III judges. They're here for life, but they could lose their legitimacy, and they care deeply about that. And what they're arguing to us over and over again is, you can trust us. We're not just politicians. And let's remember, if we stop having any respect for them, if we stop giving them legitimacy, then they don't have any power. And frankly, our system of government with 3 different branches really fails to exist. They don't have a military. They have the written word, right? And if we don't respect that, then this whole experiment in having an independent judiciary really falls apart. So I think it's a lot of self-defense. And I think it is, as you said, I think it's priming us for, you should respect what's about to come down, because it's just about our different philosophies. It's not about political ideology. I don't think that's going to fly with a lot of the American public when they see abortion, religious rights, gun control, potentially issues dealing with racial inequities. But they're trying.
But hold on. So Jessica and Anne-Marie, just to follow up on that, about the legitimacy. I mean, it's one thing to have the American people, saying that they don't have confidence in the court, but you had the former president of the United States. I mean, talk about a bully pulpit, the commander in chief saying what he said about the Supreme Court in the wake of the election. For a large swath of people in this country, what President Trump says, they go with. And so what I guess I'm asking is, hasn't there been a little bit of that erosion already due to some of the things we've heard from the former president that we didn't hear, for example, from the former Vice President Al Gore, for example, when the Supreme Court went against his lawsuit back in 2000?
Oh, absolutely. The Supreme Court approval ratings are at, I believe, historic lows. There was just a poll that came out, I think, about 10 days ago. Former President Trump is in a weird position here because he appointed a third of the court. So on the one hand, he can't say this is a court that lacks all legitimacy, never listen to anything they say. On the other hand, what we did hear him say in the post-election litigation, or frankly, when any decision didn't go his way, even if the law was clearly to the contrary, we heard him say the Supreme Court is a disappointment, they're an embarrassment, et cetera. trying to kind of have it both ways. But yes, in so many circumstances, I would say, not just with the Supreme Court, but with respect to other branches of government, we heard the former president really try and erode our confidence in, frankly, I think anything but him.
Jessica Levinson, really interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.